My name is Professor Alex Wade. I'm a member of the psychology department at the University of York, and it's my great pleasure today to welcome Dr. Manousos Klados, who's going to give a talk on controlling computers with our minds. A few technical notes before we start. So if you're watching live, you can use the little Q&A tab down the bottom on your Zoom console. I'm sure you've been doing this for many months now. And then we'll go through the Q&As at the end. So I don't want to interrupt Manousos as he's talking, but at the end there'll be plenty of time to go through the Q&As and I'll ask and answer them. If you have a loss of Wi-Fi, you can reconnect using the original link. That shouldn't be a problem. And this event will be available to watch again on our YouTube channel after the 20th of June. There are subtitles in the event, and sometimes those are really good and sometimes they're really annoying. And if you want to turn them off, you can click the CC Live transcript button also at the bottom. So I'm going to introduce Manousos in a second, but just to say where he's coming from. City College in Thessaloniki is a partnership with the University of York. It's our University of York Europe campus. So the University of York and City College have agreed a major strategic partnership. And City College, University of York Europe campus, is a flagship initiative. The campus status reflects equivalency in teaching, quality standards, learning resources, and student experience. The partnership sees York awarding degrees across various subject areas, including English, psychology, business, administration, economics, and computer science. And the psychology part of that is obviously very interesting to us. So, as I said, it's a real pleasure to introduce Dr. Klados. He's an associate professor in the psychology department at City College and in our University of York Europe campus. And his research interests include mathematical anxiety. I think we've all had some of that in the past. Brain networks, affective and personality computing, and biomedical signal processing. He got his PhD in medicine with distinction from Aristotle University in 2014. He did a postdoc in the Neuroanatomy and Connectivity Research Group at Max Planck in Leipzig from 2014. And he was a senior researcher in the Department of Lifespan Development Neurosciences in Dresden. He then became a lecturer in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at Aston University here in the UK from 2017 to 2020, and he joined City College in Greece last year, where I assume the weather is a bit better than it is in Aston. So it's my great pleasure to hand over to Manousos, who will be talking for the next 40 minutes or so. As I said, place your questions into the Q&A, and we'll deal with them at the end, and we'll let Manousos take the stage. Thank you.
So I would like to thank you all for your kind invitation. And I thought when I was thinking what to present, I would like to present something that it's catchy, let's say that. So I think to make the big question, if we can control computers using our brain. Of course, the answer is yes, otherwise we wouldn't be here. So we will see a bit about the theory behind, as well as the technology that has been developed the last year that is based on the brain, and this technology is called brain-computer interfaces. To move on, one moment, please. Everyone, I believe, that knows what is the brain. The brain is an internal organ we have inside our head. It's responsible for for almost all the functionalities of the human body. Computer, everyone knows what is a computer, and now the big question here is what is an interface? Usually, what I say an interface to my students, it's a medium, okay, to connect two things. Taking a very, let's say, strict definition, in computing, an interface is a shared boundary across which two or more separate components of a system exchange information. Unfortunately, as I see here, we don't have an interaction. We have only the Q&A. So I would ask here if you can tell me some interfaces, but now I can show you an interface. This interface, the TV controller between us and the television. This is another interface between us and the car, where we can control the car. And of course, the most known, let's say, interface between human and the computer is the mouse, where we can control the pointer of the screen and do various stuff across the screen. And now, do you know what I realized? I realized that I see my son, for example, is 6 years old, when he takes a mouse, he cannot move it so easily. And I see how much trained we are to use precisely a mouse and do very fast our job. And this is something that we, across the years, we get trained on that, to use the mouse very quickly and very accurately. And think about this information I gave you right now, because we will see afterwards in the interface that we see afterwards that although they are, let's say, not so accurate or not so fast, we can understand using years of, let's say, practice. We can master them, and we can be very, very fast in using and exchanging information with the computers. Another, of course, interface is a keyboard, or our voice, especially in the last years, where we have those voice assistants like Siri, like Google, or like Alexa, which is from Amazon. And of course, another interface is the touch screen, and not only the screen. The screen, it's a let's say, a device that gives us the output of the computer. The fact that it's a touch screen, that we can touch the screen and point application. So this is the interface that enables us to communicate with the mobile. In this sense, a brain-computer interface, it's, let's say, a way to connect our brain with the computer and give, let's say, some mental commands to the computer. Before moving on our presentation, I would like again to ask you something about this, but probably no one is going to answer me. The question was if you can find something real in this picture, where we see a guy here that is thinking, and we have a bulb lighting up, and the idea of this picture behind, it's the core element of the brain-computer interface, or the abbreviation of a BCI. And what we exploit mainly for the brain-computer interface is the electricity produced by the brain. Yes, the brain produces electricity. And the good thing is that this electricity, we can record it. How the brain, So what is responsible for this electricity, and how the electricity, or otherwise called electroencephalogram, which is the, let's say, the device electroencephalogram that records this brain electrical activity, how this activity is produced. This is due to the smallest, let's say, unity of the human brain, which is a neuron or a neural cell, which is produced the pulses, electrical pulses. Very, very briefly, a neural cell has the main, let's say, the cell body and the axon. The pulse travels from the body through, let's say, the axon to the terminals, which then passes to the dendrites of the next neuron, and so on. So the neurons between themselves communicate with electrical pulses. They send electrical pulses and they receive electrical pulses. And what is happening actually here in the connections in the synapse, as we say, the electrical pulse is let's say, translated to some chemical compounds, which the neurotransmitters, that are fired from this end to this end. And then again, an electrical pulse, again, let's say, is produced and travels through the body and the action of the neuron. Today, the point is not to talk about these potentials and so on. The only thing that I would like to say, in order to have, although you can understand, of course, you can understand that this small, let's say, unity cannot be recorded using the current technology that we have without making something invasive. In order to get something that we can measure it from our scalp, we need billions of neurons to fire together or in synchrony in order to record what we say the EEG signal, the electroencephalographic signal. This is how it looks like. As you can see, the electroencephalographic signal, it seems like a bit, let's say, random signal. However, we can see here some synchrony. This is the well-known alpha brain wave. And you can see this is the changes of the voltage recording from different places of the head. For example, this is the left prefrontal area, the right prefrontal area, and so on and so forth. This is the frontal central area. and so on and so forth. We have the ability to record nowadays from the scalp the last time I saw it was around 2000, let's say, electrodes. It was from a company that makes some application, some brain computer interface application, and it, let's say, connected with the, how to say that, with art and fashion and so on. Rather than that, in the labs, what we are doing is we try to find a balance between how accurately a BCI could be and how much the less sensors that we can use. Okay, we recorded the EEG activity. You know how it is. Now, what we exploit actually in order to develop and implement brain-computer interfaces is actually one of the components is the brain waves, which is not something more than specific, let's say, frequency bands from the EEG signal. As you can see here from bottom to top, we can see the slowest brain waves, which is the delta activity that, let's say, they appear in unconscious mind or collective, let's say, consciousness. And as we increase, we go to theta band, to alpha band, and beta band or beta waves. The other thing that it's, let's say, very, very crucial about brain-computer interfaces is what we call event-related potentials. In order to record event-related potentials, of course, we need an event. Okay, and what we actually do is that we record the EEG signal and we investigate the EEG signal exactly after the stimulus onset, the event onset. And of course, when we, let's say, have one trial, only one from these, let's say, segments of the signals, we cannot understand something. However, if we do that many times, we repeat the measure many times, and we average this kind of segments, we see that we have some waveforms that have a meaning. And actually, this is a very typical example. Well, we have here 8 trials, and you can see here the average data when we have the average of the first trial, the average of the first 2 trials, the average of the first 3 trials, and so on, and the average of the 8 trials. And you can see this negative peak here in 400 milliseconds almost. And let's say, very roughly, let's say that the near and event-related potential, let's say, peak signal, let's say that it's this waveform where we have the P1, which is, let's say, the positive peak on 100 milliseconds. Let me tell you something, and honestly, I don't know why in the ERPs we have the actions reversed. So the minus are on top and the plus are on the bottom, so don't be confused. Then exactly after the P1, we have the new 100, which is the negative at 100 components, the P200, the P200, and then the P300, which ranges from 300 to 400, let's say that. And this P300 is what we mostly exploit for brain-computer interfaces because it's the peak. It's the peak, let's say that is strongly connected with what we call oddball examples, where we have in very rapidly, let's say that a stimulus, a visual stimulus or an auditory stimulus without expecting that. Okay, this was very brief. I didn't like this presentation to be focused so much on science details rather than depict the result of this science. So we said about a brain-computer interface, what it is, the definition, which is actually a communication system that does not depend on peripheral nerves or muscles. It only depends to the central nervous system, which is the brain, without doing anything else. Our main goal that BCIs were developed is to enable people, especially the disabled, to communicate and control devices only using their thoughts and nothing more, because there are some cases that the muscles, let's say we have a problem with the muscles or the movements, and a patient cannot do very basic things in order to communicate. So in this case, the brain-computer interfaces, let's say, are very prominent, and they are, let's say, they can save a life, or they can, in other words, it can make let's say, the quality of the life much, much better. This is how a BCI system looks like, where actually we have here the brain, which is connected with an EEG machine where we acquire the signals. Then we have a black box, let's say that, where we extract some features, and we have some machine learning algorithms and so on in order to translate what they read from the brain in actions, okay? And these actions depend according to the example. It can be, let's say, used in neuroprocess control or in a wheelchair control. We can type using our brain a speller example, or even we can play games with our brain in order to enhance some cognitive components, some cognitive abilities that we have. Oops, I'm sorry. Wrong button. As I told you, the motivation behind was to develop technologies for people with disabilities. So in order to do that, we need to develop both hardware and software for disabled people. And some examples about to assist blind people to visualize external images, or to assist paralyzed people to operate external devices without any physical movements. And of course, at the end of all this, the main, let's say, the common components to decode brain activity. The types of the human BCI are three. It's the invasive one, which is the most accurate, and with this we can do a lot of things. However, to implant directly into the gray matter, let's say electrodes and needles, it's not the most easy procedure in the world. So if it's not very, very urgent, we avoid that. Because also it has some other, let's say, problems like you have an open skull where you have a lot increased probability of infection and so on. We have a partial invasive BCI where BCI devices are implanted inside the skull but rest outside the brain, and you will see such devices. And we have also the non-invasive BCIs where it's the most, let's say, common ones, the one BCIs that currently used a lot, where we have electrodes attached to the skull so as to record the brain activity or the EEG activity. Let me see the time. Okay, I think that we need to move on a bit to go to more, let's say, important stuff. What I have here to show you today, it's some examples. Now, the first example is the speller, and the motivation behind developing a speller application. It's for ALS, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. In this disease, let's say in this disorder, how to say that, the muscles weakness and the atrophy throughout the body caused by the degeneration of upper and lower motor neurons. And the individual who suffer from this disease lose the ability to initiate and control all voluntary movement and actions. However, in most of the cases, the cognitive function is preserved, so the people are healthy, let's say, in the cognitive level of the brain, and they can think the brain gives command to be executed, but the body doesn't follow. Okay. So the sensory nerves and the autonomic nervous system is generally unaffected. So we need a way to enable them to communicate, especially if the problems if the disease is in this severe level that has affected the face muscles and so on. So for this reason, we have developed the P300 speller. The P300 is for the ERP component that I told you before. In this example, we have a user which observes a 6x6 matrix with letters, and the patient focus his eye on a letter. Now, then randomly a column or a row lights up, and when the row or the column lights up that contains the letter, the user gives, let's say, a peak on 300 milliseconds after the light up of the line of the column. After several repetitions, the machine can recognize in which column and in which line the subject, the patient, pays attention. So the intersection, taking the intersection, we can find in which letter he or she is focused. Here is an example from the Vision Lab. Let me start the video from the beginning. It's from Audio Vision Lab. It's a very nice, let's say, demonstration of a P300 speller. They use a GTEC from GTEC, and a GTEC amplifier with a cap, as I can see here, with around 8 electrodes, and let's say 2 auxiliary electrodes. This is how the preparation is performed. They put some gel, a conductive gel, inside the ring electrodes in order to increase the conductivity between the skull and the electrode sensor. And now, as you can see here, this is the signal, the EEG signal, how it looks like, that is recording from the user of the system. While on the next screen, as you can see here, we have the 6x6 grid, which very, very quickly, very rapidly, some lines and columns are, let's say, flashed. Now, the subject, he tries to write the word vision. He's focused on the letter V, now on the letter I, and when the line or the column of I lights up, the BCI detects this. So after several repetitions, in order to increase its accuracy, it recognizes the letter I. You see how slow is this process, and keep in mind this because afterwards we will see, let's say, a speller that it's, let's say, the state of the art of technology right now, which is much, much faster. The second application is BCI control wheelchair, where we have a user that sits inside the wheelchair, and the quest here and the mission here is to give commands to the wheelchair to turn left and right. The idea again is the same. We acquire some signals, the EEG signals. We do some pre-processing, we extract some features, and we make the classification about left or right turn and so on, and then these are translated into action of the wheelchair which is moved. The main feature that is exploited in this BCI is that when we have an imaginary movement, for example, an imaginary left turn, then the scalp topology, the topology that's produced something like this. So we have in the left central area increased activity, while on the rest of the brain we have some neutral activity. While when we imagine turn right, we have the opposite, let's say, pattern. And this can be very easily exploited and translated in order to make an application. And as you can see here, if a user tries to move the wheelchair around some objects, now he's going to turn left, so he's thinking left. The wheelchair turns left. And again left, so as to go around the red box. And you see how accurate and fast is this. Then at the end of the active BCI system, I would like to show you the winner, the first place winner of the BCI, the annual BCI Award of 2020, last year. The BCI Award, it's a very, let's say, famous competition for the researcher that tries to produce a very sophisticated BCIs, as well as with increased accuracy and speed. And what they actually do, you can see here.
Our goal is to build a high-performance BCI that can restore communication to people who are locked in by using handwriting motor imagery. We tested our BCI in one study participant who was implanted with 2 microelectrode arrays in hand area of motor cortex and who was paralyzed from the neck down. Here's how our decoder works. We use multi-unit threshold crossing rates as features. A recurrent neural network decoder converts these into the probability of each character being written at the current time step. The probabilities can be thresholded to admit discrete characters, which we did for real-time use. Offline, we explored using a large vocabulary language model to autocorrect typos. Here's what it looks like in real time when our participant uses the BCI to copy a sentence shown on the screen. Our participant is typing freely and entirely at his own pace. Note that our decoder is fully general in that the user can type any sequence of characters, including sentences that never appeared in the training data. In the next video, we compare our handwriting BCI, shown on the top, to the current state-of-the-art performance for intracortical BCIs, shown on the bottom. In both videos, the user is copying the same sentence. Our handwriting BCI is more than twice as fast as the current state-of-the-art. To our knowledge, the typing rates we achieved set a new record for BCIs of any kind. After 5 days of practice, our participant could type at 90 characters per minute at high accuracies. The raw accuracy achieved in real time was 94.5%. When we used a general-purpose language model to simulate autocorrection, the accuracy was above 99%. Our results show that fast, dexterous behaviors can be accurately decoded years after paralysis, and point the way towards a new type of BCI that can help people who are locked in to communicate faster.
Okay, now we discussed about active BCIs, and now we are going to see some passive BCIs, and we'll close this session with the passive BCIs. Let me explain what is the passive BCIs. Active BCIs are directed, let's say, on motor commands, while the passive BCIs, let's say, are directed to more delicate functionality of the brain, like recognition, the personality, or the emotions. And while active BCIs are used to execute a command or an action, passive BCIs are used to adapt the computer environment. These are very, let's say, helpful in e-learning and so on. Regarding the cognition, we have, for example, a BCI that can measure a cognitive component and interact with the computer. For an example, I will show you something that I have developed, which is an attention control media player, Windows media player. And this was targeted to train the attention of children suffering from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, or attention deficits. This is the video. Let me close the voice because it's in Greece. Here it's, let's say, the interface of the media player, the attention, let's say, media player. Here, I use this by developing the NeuroSky headset, which is only one electrode, the BCI, for using one electrode on the left prefrontal cortex. Let me describe you. Let's connect it. Okay, now the BCI is connected. Here is the attention level from 0 to 100. Now I load the video file that could be, for example, let's say a cartoon and so on. And now this is the chosen attention. So now I have choose 100% of attention. So if the current attention, which is this, it's lower than the asked one, then the video is paused. When this is higher than this one, the video plays normally. So in order for a kid to see the whole cartoon or listen to the whole music and so on, he should train the attention according to the desired levels, let's say that. In this sense, we have a Windows media player that's controlled using our attention in terms of play and stop. Okay. And believe me that it was very annoying when it was paused. Okay, this was one typical example for passive BCIs that can train cognition. And then we can discuss about personality. Regarding personality BCIs, in BCI that the connection between a BCI and the personality, the passive BCI and the personality, it's a BCI that can detect human personality and adapt the environment. The typical applications that we have right now, it's about learning or some interventions in order to focus on the right paths of the interventions, as well as the main priority for personality that it's, let's say, exploited tens of years, let's say decades now. It's about entertainment. And you know, all the companies of the game developers and so on, they based a lot on personality research. And for personality detection, here I made an experiment where some people were looking to, actually I didn't make the experiment, this open data, I analyzed them, where they used they saw some video clips, very short, that were, let's say, with pleasant or unpleasant content. The signals were recorded using a motive headset from 14 electrodes. Then we done some pre-processing and some feature selection here. And then we do some magic, scientific magic here, using classification techniques and machine learning techniques. And we managed to recognize the 5 main dimensions of personality, having these accuracies, which 84% for extraversion, 86.5% for agreeableness, 84.8% for possessiveness. The same for neuroticism, the lowest degree was 73% for openness. This was the presentation, just a second, for today. Closing, I would like to, let's say, to highlight a few things. BCI is a very promising technology, and that's why a lot of money are invested toward this direction, toward this technology. However, we should keep in mind the problems that we face and how difficult it is to decode the brain. The brain is the most complex organ in the human body. Until now, after I can say 100 years of research, the first one who recorded the EEG signals was Hans Berg, exactly before 100 years in the early 90s. Until now, we cannot say that we know the brain, we know how it works. We have some, let's say, some ideas about how the brain works, but again, we miss a lot of things. And these things are very crucial in order to develop further and more reliable BCIs. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Now I think I'm time.
Thank you. I don't know how we clap in this day and age. I can clap.
You don't have to clap. Thank you very much.
It's very nice. And you've also, I think this may be unique among some of our speakers. You've managed to finish on time, which is very good.
Yeah.
So just a reminder to the audience.
That's why I missed 2 or 3 slides.
Oh no! Well, I didn't want to rush you. So anyway, fine. I think maybe we'll get a chance to catch up. Maybe if you want to show them in the quick Q&A. So just a reminder to the audience: you can post questions in the Q&A. We already have a couple there, and then I'll go down the questions and we'll ask them to Manousos. And please feel free to take your time, Manousos, because you've bought yourself some extra time. So here's the first question.
Are trials taking place with more invasive methods in the skull, or it is too dangerous a procedure? Of course, the trials, most of the experiments are taking place with, let's say, with non-invasive methods. However, we are using invasive techniques when we have an open brain procedure for health reasons, for medical reasons, and we need to operate a patient. Then we can have also such experiments. The most, let's say, famous scientific, let's say, scientists like this experiment was from the Niels Birbauer from Tübingen, who invented a BCI that someone can communicate with people in coma somehow. It was like an interface using yes or no answers. And these trials performed on such case where there was a need to open the skull for an operation. Could this technology also work with coma patients? Yes, and yes and no. It depends. It depends to what coma state they are. It depends to what we are looking for. If we would try to communicate what level of communication we can achieve. However, if you would like to check more about the coma patients and the BCI, you can search for the work from Niels Birbauer, Professor Niels Birbauer. I cannot pronounce his name. And find there what he did, which it's amazing job. In my opinion, he's the best. What he did with coma patients. How do you think the technology will advance in the future? That's a very, very good question. How I think the technology will advance in the future. What I believe that will happen is that we will make more accurate brain-computer interfaces, and we will find not only more accurate, but more sophisticated ways to interact with computers. And in order to facilitate even more, let's say, patient groups and so on. And on the other hand, what I believe mostly, it's BCI, let's say it's a field, a subfield of human-computer interaction. And according to my belief, the passive BCI I show you, where it's a BCI where it can recognize the emotions or the personality or the mood and adapt, make the computer adapt not only the interface, but also the actions and other characteristics. This can facilitate the communication between the human and the computer and make it more naturalistic. Because when we have a human-to-human interaction, we don't listen only to words, or we don't speak only. We just also receive some visual cues that are, let's say, mental cues. That it's the body language, for example, or a simple smile can say a lot. And all the stuff that are currently missing from the interaction that we have with the computers. Miss Hudson, you highlighted ADHD. Would you please elaborate on this also? What about people with OCD? Yes. So I didn't talk about this too much in this presentation, but what I showed before in the passive BCI for cognition, it was actually a neurofeedback application. What I mean, neurofeedback is a kind of technique that we can, let's say, train some specific components of the brain, which like attention, or some patterns that we know that are related with abnormal behavior. Like we know, for example, that in depression, we see a strong asymmetry of the alpha brain waves in the prefrontal cortex. So in this sense, we can have some BCIs of neurofeedback application that by normalizing this asymmetry, they can, let's say, we can have some symptom relief. There is a lot of research done on this field the last years. The results are in the depression, especially, that I know, it's not so promising. Sometimes we find some very good results, some other times we not. So there are many open questions here. Regarding OCD, to be honest, I'm not aware right now, but I believe someone worldwide have done also something for compulsive disorder. In terms of, let's say, neurofeedback, probably, for sure, I believe that someone tried some neurofeedback protocols for OCD that have the same, let's say, how to say that, the same philosophy behind. Miss Christina, any specific disorders, personality types that are planning on working in the future with BCI, what would you consider? I'm not sure that I understand your questions properly. The personality BCI is just, for example, to detect a personality. What does it mean? It means, for example, that if we have a person that it's not, let's say, so with low openness, so we will adapt our system to use again and again the same scenarios. Regarding the ethical considerations, probably there are some ethical considerations, of course, that such system can be, let's say, for example, such a personality, it's a very, let's say, crucial in terms of hiring someone of some soft skills and so on. So there is some ethical concerns if it's used for hiring someone. However, let's think that nowadays there are various tools, psychometric tools, that are used, for example, from the recruiters, and they can, let's say, measure your personality unconsciously without you to understand that using various type of questions and so on. However, with EEG, it's more, let's say, direct, it's more objective and so on. Rather than this, I cannot an ethical consideration regarding. Okay, Christina, let's continue with Christina. Christina says again on as a question to my answer, she means that for that personality traits and ethical consideration regarding that. This is, I believe, that the ethical considerations that arise regarding dark triad and similar personality models are the same like the psychometric questions. We don't do something more, just we change the tools that we use, not the way that we use that. In a psychometric questionnaire, we do some questions or we make some observations, and then we, let's say, rank the personality dimension. The same can happen with the brain waves. These two are answered, and one here. Can you see a day when we'll be controlling electric wind in the home with our brains turning on lights again, with your voice thinking realms of science fiction in the past? Yes. No, I don't see that to come very early, and I don't think that there is a reason to do that. Since, as we say, we can control, let's say, the devices using our voice, imagine that it will be much harder to wear an equipment in our head in order to think open lights and the lights were open. I think that's much easier to say open lights and the lights will open. Now, when we have, let's say, a disability, for sure this can be done. So as you can imagine, how actually, in very, very roughly now I'm talking, how a BCI works and personalized brain-computer interface, with these brain-computer interfaces that it's made for a specific person and it's made to recognize the specific person's patterns. We can train classifiers according to one brain, to a specific brain, for specific commands. Okay, so we say someone, for example, imaginary think the phrase turn on lights. We make a lot of trials of this with various, let's say, protocols and experiments and so on. So we recognize how the electrical activity of the brain looks like when the specific person uses and thinks this phrase. And when we detect this phrase, we know that it's for turning on lights. And we, let's say, connect this command with the specific brain activity. The same can happen with various other commands. Okay, so in terms of some disabilities, yes, we can exploit such technology where someone cannot speak for various reasons, or that we cannot use, let's say, simpler ways of communicating with our environment. Mr. Kocharidis, answer live, done. What action in neuroscience need to follow to develop EEG as a more reliable personality type classification? What actions in neurosciences need to follow to develop EEG as a more reliable? Yeah, here it needs a lot of research to be done again, because as, for example, if you saw my research, this research was based on a research of 2015, where let me remember, the title of the paper was that it's not possible to predict personality from the EEG resting state spectrum. So what I actually did was that I changed the resting state with emotional processing and the power spectrum with the brain networks, and exploiting the brain network. So I achieved very higher, let's say, higher accuracy. However, if you see also this accuracy at the end of the day, and you see critically, this accuracy is not very high. Although we have, let's say, around almost 90% of accuracy in 4 of the 5 dimensions. If you multiply 0 by 0.9 by 0.9 by 0.9 by 0.9 and so on, and then by 0.75, which is the openness, the overall accuracy decreases around to 50%. And this is happening because dimension is assumed to be as separate as, let's say, dependent dimension. And one human is not independent, it does not, its personality is not in independent dimensions, their combination. So we need to do a lot of more research from that. We need to understand the biology that rests behind personality, the neurobiology of personality. And then we need more, let's say, tools, not more tools, more, how to say that? More increased samples in order to detect differences in personality. Because let me tell you something: when we have this happens every time, it's mathematics, nothing but statistics. When you have a small variation on some quantity, you need a lot of samples, high samples, in order to get the needed, to observe the needed variance. Okay, this is the same thing with personality, because the difference, the variance in personality, it's very, very small. You need increased samples to do that. When we have that, I believe that we can move forward and we can develop more, let's say, reliable tools, CG-based tools to classify personality. Next question: if someone wanted to get into working design BCI, how would you suggest they start? Okay, yes, that's a very good question. First of all, I believe that you need programming a lot in BCI, especially when you develop online BCIs, that they record each activity and they need immediately to translate that activity to some action. And then knowledge about neuroscience and EEG is mandatory. Is the response to
I hate to interrupt, Manousos, but two things. First of all, I think we might be coming to the end of the questions, but also, just for the last person, it is useful to have training in neuroscience, but there is a website called openbci.com where you can go to and they'll teach you how to make very primitive EEG systems that you can use to see your own brainwaves. So if you really want to do this as a hobby, it's now a hobbyist thing as well. And
exactly
is a thing.
Yes, and also you said to the market there are very cheap devices, as well as Alex said, you can build your own BCI. They have, for example, the Open BCI has files that can be used to 3D print so as to have such to make such BCI systems and work on that. Is the response to specific stimulus always the same? For example, thinking the phrase "eternal lights" will produce the same neural response. Yeah, no. The answer to this is no. This is one of the major problems that we have on the classification of single trials. It's, as we say, that it is the increased in the individual variability. So it's the increased variability that we observed in the same individual across trials. It will not produce exactly the same activity, neural response. However, a lot of many things will be common. Okay, and I think brain always, like like Herodotus said, that you can never walk in the same river, because the river it has a flowing water. Okay, so the river is never the same. The same happens with the brain. The brain is not the same with my brain. For example, my brain is not the same like my brain before 1 second. Okay, so this is a reason why we have such in the individual variability. I think that I hope that the answer also.
That was a mammoth Q&A session. Well done.
Okay.
Properly unmute myself and thank you again for coming and doing all this work. And,
thank you also.
Presentation, really interesting. And I think we'll have to check in with you in a couple of years' time and see what's been going on, see what advances you've made.
That's good.
I'm going to, for the audience, I'm going to give you No, we're gonna stop.
There's also another one.
There's coming in at the end. We're going to stop here now. And thank you again. And I'm sure people can track you down.
Thank you also.
Online. So if they want to email you, then I'm sure you can answer questions by email.
Yes, of course. You can see my email here. Everything you need to ask after the session, you are pretty, let's say, welcome. Send me an email for whatever you want.
Excellent. All right.
Thank you very much.